Hey, didn't you say you were playing Selaco?
Yeah, this is it.
I thought it was a first-person shooter.
No, this is it.
I just think you should probably take a break.
I'm making good on my promise from last video to play more clickers with Selaco. In this game, you click on hamburgers and nothing else. Just clicking, and clicking, and clicking, and clicking, and clicking, and clicking.
Ow. What?
Are you gonna review the real game now?
Yeah?
Selaco started development as a Doom mod called Ominous, being pursued by one person, named Bleh. I wasn't able to find a name. It was being made with the intent of transforming it into something closer to Fear, another FPS I haven't played, with its destructible environments. Somewhere in the middle of development came the realization that the original Doom's campaign was restricting their ambitions. So it was changed into a custom campaign using GZ Doom, Doom's original engine, with many more developers being hired on to help, forming Altered Orbit Studios. That was all fine and dandy for a little bit, but it was apparent that the legs that it was on, the Ominous mod, were shaky, so the decision to restart the project as something wholly original was made. Then it was released onto Steam, with an eventual release on GOG. That had to have sucked, spending all that time and work just after restart, but in the long run, I'd say it paid off, considering the high praise that it has received since its release. I will say straight away that what Altered Orbit was able to achieve on a 35-plus-year-old engine was amazing. It wears an old shell, one that's been battle-hardened by decades worth of fan modding, that the output it produces rarely resembles the original Doom, unless you're the main character. Damn, you look old. As in, if I didn't know what engine this was built in, and you told me Unity, I'd probably say it checks out. So here I am, making a video and throwing in even more praise as well, even if it gets swallowed up by other bigger channels' videos, and nobody watches this. Thanks for watching. That being said, I still feel like I have an overall more negative outlook than most people. For transparency's sake, I play on the Commander difficulty, what the game labels as hard mode, because I like a good challenge, but I feel the combat doesn't really hold up against scrutiny with enemies that can kill you as quickly as they do. Just look at the trailers and you'll see some insane shit that looks badass, but I wouldn't suggest playing like that, because chances are you'll be mowed down within a few seconds. Perhaps the game provides a much smoother experience on lower difficulties, but because of this, my first playthrough was plagued by some difficulty spikes that felt unwinnable. I stuck it out, however, and by the end I came away with a very mixed outlook. But to explain that, we have to get into the first half of this package, the story. This game takes place in the world of Selaco, an underground, futuristic city created after an event known as the Fall, where the Earth became uninhabitable. Also, what do you know, there's an invasion going on by aliens. I hate when that happens. You play as Dawn, a security captain for Ace, a company that provides security to the people of Selaco. Apparently she was on an investigation into the shady nature of Selaco before this invasion happened. Now she must deal with aliens and get to the bottom of what's happening at Selaco. At least that's what the story section on the game's website says. In-game, however, you don't get much of any direct storytelling. The only way you're going to have a clue of what's going on is context clues and the assload of messages you pick up throughout the game from these data packs. I like a show, don't tell sort of story, but this is about as telling as it gets, requiring you to get most of the story through these. Perhaps their focus was on the gameplay rather than the story, so it doesn't bog down the pace, but there's definitely a way that this information that the data packs provide could have been incorporated into the world, because these messages can get pretty long, and you're a gamer, so I know that you don't like to read. That way you don't have all this stop and go progression, so even if their intent was to keep the pace up, these long ass messages still end up bogging it down, if you choose to read them. There are no cutscenes to give you even an inkling of what's going on. There's nobody to interact with, and I understand that there's an alien invasion going on, but this place is desolate. The most you're going to get are these cold PA announcements that can sometimes be humorous, as well as these Gwen stations that provide health packs for a cost. There is a hint of something boiling underneath the surface for what the leaders of Selaco are hiding in line with what the website said, with these data packs of course implying that they're manipulating the media to hide the truth behind the Fall, but that's all we get. A few interesting tidbits. Obviously, I think this aspect could have been more fleshed out, not just regulating it to a few data packs here and there. I want to see this shit. But hey, isn't there an alien invasion going on right now? That must be where the bulk of the story is, considering that's the main conflict. But no. By the end I had no clue who these aliens were or why they want to take over. Maybe I just missed some data files that explain this. After all, there's a shit ton of them. Selaco's tone evokes a depressing vibe, with all these dead bodies around, and the messages from people that you can only assume are dead now. Despite this, it can hit you with some real mood whiplash, like the few fleeting moments of hopefulness, or anytime there's a VACBot on the screen. These guys are precious and must be protected at all costs. Then there's Dawn, who is about the most plank of wood that you can get. She doesn't emote, and she doesn't have anything to say about anything going on. You can just barely pick up her personality from the few messages that she does send. These paint her as pretty much all business, all the time. Not too much character to go around here. Thankfully, the patrons of this world are much more interesting. I did generally get some laughs from a few of these, like this pizza guy's messages. I just wish that character could have extended to the main one, you know? But that doesn't mean that all these get to go scot-free either. The majority of them are just standard business talk, and my eyes were definitely starting to glaze over just reading all of it. There are a few other moments in the actual world that did put a smile on my face, like this random baby shower that's still up even though there's an alien invasion going on. The messages around the place imply that this happened before all this started. So does that mean that they just left all this stuff flying around here? Does that mean that I'm looking way too far into this? Maybe, but that doesn't change the fact that they're all dead now. This bar where you can spend money to jam to some tunes while slaughtering aliens. You can even start a bar fight, although I don't know how much of a fight there can be if it's just one person, unless you're fighting internally. So where it is now, I feel that there's a chance for something interesting, but I feel it hasn't hit its full potential yet. So that was the story. What about the gameplay? It plays pretty smoothly for an FPS, but it definitely has its snags. You have the standard, crouching to hide behind cover, sliding to avoid damage even if it doesn't work all the time. You find many different guns that all feel unique in how they handle. A magnum, assault rifle, submachine gun, shotgun, grenade launcher, the works. On hard, all of them felt like they had good power. No enemies felt like bullet sponges, which is good, considering how many they throw at you. Each gun comes with multiple secondary firing methods. Most of them come with ADS right away, but many of them can switch it to something different. Most of them are hidden quite well, so you'll have to do a little digging to find them, but they're definitely worth going after. Like the double tap for the magnum that fires 2 bullets at once, just like the name suggests. Or being able to dual wield submachine guns, which is just as cool as it sounds. I got the most use out of the 2 guns with the yellow ammo. This was a test to figure out if you're paying attention or not. They serve as the best choice for mid-range fighting without sacrificing a lot of accuracy. It sucks that these 2 guns guzzle down ammo so fast. I was constantly looking for more, like some sort of drug addict. Being close to an enemy was a one-stop shop to Death City, so these guns ended up serving me well. Predictably, that means, and I'm sad to say, the shotgun got the least amount of use. Don't get me wrong, it's powerful as shit. Just watch this. That felt good, but if you mess it up, the punishment is so high that it's not even worth trying to do it. I was pretty consistently maxed out on shotgun ammo because I didn't want to take the risk of getting close enough for it to be effective. Also, not a fan of how you have to fill the chamber after every shot. Can't tell you how many times I went up to an enemy ready to shoot, and the gun was empty, so I got shot like a dolt. Every other FPS I've played always does this automatically, so if it's gotta be like this, the small text at the bottom of the screen that serves as your warning isn't gonna cut it. You gotta make it bigger, really blow it up so I can actually tell what it says. The Magnum served its purpose as a starting weapon very well, but then I proceeded to barely use it afterwards. That was until I got the double tap firing ability. Then I used it liberally after because it got some real stomping power, and the terrible recoil is barely an issue if you can get the first shot off. The second shot will hit afterward. Then the grenade launcher is just a grenade launcher. You have 3 different types of ammo: frag, ice, and acid. Not much to say really, I barely used it personally. You can also use your bare fist if you need to in a pinch. It's actually pretty good for stunning enemies if you happen to get too close. Honestly, it's probably a much better outcome if you do that instead of using the shotgun. I can't stress how much I just did not like using it here, which sucks because I love shotguns in these sorts of games, but I guess just not here. Sorry to be ragging on it so much, let's just move on. You also get access to multiple sub-weapons as well, like different types of grenades or landmines that are really fun for anticipating ambushes. Or most likely you died to one and then placed one where they spawned. I know I got a lot of use out of that. That might seem like a lot, but guess what? There's more! You can also upgrade these weapons using weapon parts and these tech cards that you can find. These can range from increasing attributes like rate of fire or power to even giving certain abilities to certain weapons. I do have to question the price of these upgrades though. By the time I was done, I wasn't even halfway through getting them all. And I was thorough when it came to finding parts, so I feel like I wasn't missing out on a whole bunch. So I feel like they could cost a bit less, so they're easier to obtain. That sounds like you're pretty stacked for this adventure. And not only can you get weapons, but you can also win the game of capitalism by taking people's money. I mean, they're dead. They don't need it. You can spend it on Gwyn stations for health-related purchases, or there are these supply chests that you can open with money. This game must be a cakewalk then. First, have you been watching this video? Second, you don't start with all these weapons, and a lot of them you have to go out of your way to find, so they are missable. Third and finally, these enemies are lethal and quick, and have some god-tier aim for the most part. As you progress, the enemies start to use different tactics, and introduce new ones to counter you. That isn't exactly unique, sure, but the game does have the courtesy of giving you a detailed breakdown of everything that changes. You start with your usual foot soldiers before being introduced to variants. The engineers who can set up remote sentries that can add to your pain, although if you can get behind them, you can take them for yourself. You have the enforcers and heavy artillery using miniguns and the like. You also have the flyers that are a bit flat for lack of a better word. By the way, they can still shoot you when you're like that, so have fun. These little suicide bots that just love to show up in the most inopportune times, I just knew they were going to have one ambush you from around the corner in one of these vents, and you know what? It happened. And then the juggernauts, the big heavy artillery that I mentioned before. Now that might seem really impressive. Even with all these guys, all of them can be taken down with your lead. So they don't really force you to change much in terms of strategies. Just stick back as much as you can and hide behind cover. Like I said, I would not go guns a-blazing in here. Now that might seem extensive, but all of that doesn't matter if the world you fight in isn't interesting. Selaco takes place in box standard futuristic city with a bleak outlook that has some sort of dirty underside to it, and the places you visit reflect that very well. You fight through box standard office buildings, box standard sewers, box standard parking garages, and a city that is honestly pretty cool, but that I had to replay over again because my initial footage got corrupted, so thanks OBS. Good thing I had a save not too far from where that footage started. I guess this gives me a reason to talk about saving. If you've played Doom, then it's essentially the same. At any time, you can save and make yourself a makeshift checkpoint. The game gives you one pretty much before any big encounter, or when you pick up a key item. Honestly, I'd be surprised if I picked up a key and nothing happened at this point. Anyways, where was I? Oh yeah, box standard, and so on. Needless to say, I don't think the architecture here really provides anything that you couldn't get from any other FPS that takes place in a futuristic setting. That being said, that doesn't mean that these areas are bad, other than a few exceptions. There are plenty of secrets hiding for you to find. From additional money, weapon parts, upgrades, and secondary firing methods for your weapons, many of which are hidden behind breakable walls that require frag grenades or frag ammo for your grenade launcher. That's where the destructible environments part at the very beginning comes from, I see. It provides a tough choice. Do you keep your grenades for a tough enemy encounter, or do you use it to maybe get a badass upgrade to your weapons? At the very least, you're going to get something of value. The choice is yours, and that's really cool. Gives you some of that good old player agency that I've personally never talked about on this channel, but I love getting able to make choices for how I want to play, even if sometimes the reward isn't worth the trade of using up one of your offensive tools. Nothing feels quite as bad as using up your precious grenades to get a few minuscule weapon parts. One of my biggest issues is the sorts of arenas you are forced to deal with. As I listed before, a lot of fights indoors, therefore fighting in cramped spaces. You have the sort of issues that you would expect, getting stuck on everything is every space on my bingo card, and they're all blacked out. Or the glorious times that you slide to avoid fire, only to slide right under a table, and you can't move out from under it by just moving so you get blasted. That sure got extremely frustrating. I don't understand why the slide is on a timer. Yes, one of your basic ways of avoiding damage is on cooldown. In case you don't understand how this sucks, imagine this situation. You're in the heat of battle. You take a ton of damage all of a sudden from an enemy you didn't see. You need to get away quickly for obvious reasons. You slide to try and avoid damage. You take damage anyways because the enemies are sharpshooters. You finish your slide and you're still not behind any cover, or maybe you get stuck under a table and die. Now you're pissed, and you refund the game in frustration. Or maybe you just retry. I don't know. This situation was such a frequent occurrence of my playthrough. Some of these areas are just way too condensed to give you plenty of time to realize where enemies are. So many times rounded a corner just to be ambushed by enemies and killed in not 5 seconds. I can hold praise for how varied the encounters can be. There's always a ton of variables to consider in terms of what enemies there are and how each arena can challenge you for better and for worse. One thing that doesn't change much, however, is the colors. I hope you like blues and grays because that's what you're getting for most of this endeavor. Maybe if you were nice this year, Santa could give you some purple, red, and green neon lights. So yeah, this game isn't exactly blooming with colors, and this has a pretty obvious side effect of areas looking like one another and not knowing where to go. Like this time in the sewers. You need to turn off the power to unelectrify this floor so you can advance, and I got stuck here for around 15 minutes not realizing that you can shoot out this window and go this way. Sometimes going through windows is required for progression, and the windows that can be broken aren't exactly made distinct from windows that can't be, other than a slightly darker tint that I could see some people never noticing. Shout out to all my colorblind viewers out there. The game provides a useful map that marks important areas and an objective screen, but that can only help so much. It can make finding your way a drag if it isn't linear, which the majority of the game is, so if you want to see this as just a nitpick, then I don't blame you. One thing that I can give praise to is how interconnected the world is, to the point where, you can correct me if I'm wrong in the comments below, you can make a trek all the way from the ending of the game, all the way back to the start if you wanted to, as in there are no points of no return. That's impressive, other than the big loading zones that I wish weren't there, but I understand with an over 35-year-old engine you most likely couldn't keep all this loaded, even in a truncated form, not to mention how lived in this world feels. It's impressive even if these areas aren't the most conducive in terms of combat arenas. A good example of when world building can come at the cost of gameplay. Other than combat, there really isn't much else to do here. Stack some things to reach out of reach areas, and read messages so you can get codes to open up some secrets. Not exactly the most innovative stuff out there. Fun in the moment, but not something that will stick with you. And that right there is the crux of how I feel. The weapons can be fun to use, the enemies can be fun to fight, the story can be interesting, and the world is decent enough to travel through, but this isn't something that I haven't experienced before. That's why I came out of here with a sort of middle-of-the-road feeling. Of course there's something to enjoy in comfort food sorts of games, and Selaco fills that role well if you're into first-person shooters, if your idea of comfort is getting kicked in the shins repeatedly. So if you want my advice, then to have fun while playing, choose medium difficulty. If you like putting your balls in a vice, then try one of the harder ones. You can even add any of these mutators, as the game calls them, to make it even harder, like the final tier of enemies from the very start, or losing all your weapons when you start a new level. You can make this game a masochist's wet dream if you really wanted to. I'm fine, as you can no doubt tell. In the end, I felt this story was non-existent other than a few interesting tidbits, and the gameplay, while fun for the most part, was starting to get frustrating to the point where I was happy that it was finally over. So, can I recommend this game to people? Despite the negative tone of this video, I think so. It's important to emphasize the fact that I played on a higher difficulty than what I can assume is meant for most people. I get that this game is supposed to be hard. I can't really say it's a fun sort of hard, you know? There's room for experimentation in the combat, even if the higher difficulties end up squandering that potential. And I know what you're saying. This game's in early access. Of course there's going to be balanced updates to help with the combat, and the story isn't finished yet as all the levels aren't done. Sure, you're right there. But if I'm paying $25 up front, I'm expecting a sort of baseline quality, and I think for the most part it hits that line. I was honestly shocked when I finished up and my playthrough was almost 10 hours long and the game's not even finished yet, but I'm not gonna lie, by the end I was starting to get tired of it. It's probably because I played most of this game all at once. Maybe I should have listened like a good boy and took more breaks, but I can't shake the feeling that this game hasn't reached its full potential yet, so yes, I would recommend it to FPS enjoyers right now. But if you're an average player, I'd say give it a go once it's reached 1.0. But if you want to go into it right now, expect some bullshit to occur. Thanks for watching. Wait, I guess you can always play Burger Flipper. I don't know why they put this cookie clicker knockoff in the game, but I find it good for relaxation once the game starts frustrating you. Honestly, it might be better than the actual game itself. Nah, I'm just kidding. Or am I?